Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Sage Intacct Release 2 webinar. Before we get started, I'd like to go through a couple of housekeeping items. If we can please go to the next slide. You can maximize or minimize the webinar pane during the presentation by using the red or orange arrow buttons. During the webinar, we also encourage you to ask questions. You'll see a question box in the webinar window pane that you can use to type your question in and click submit. Our presenters will answer those questions as time allows during the Q&A session at the end of presentation, but also throughout the presentation as well. Next slide. Second, to ensure good audio quality, please check your setting to ensure appropriate audio option is selected. If you're using a telephone, please click the phone call audio option. Or if you're listening through your computer, then please click on the computer audio option. Next slide. Lastly, to qualify for CPE, you must use a personal computer, no smartphones, and log in with your own information and unique URL. You need to be logged into our online software for at least 50 consecutive minutes within the scheduled time frame of the webinar. You'll also need to actively respond to at least 75% of the polling questions throughout the webinar. And finally, complete the evaluation survey that pops up at the end of the webinar as you log out. Next slide. And with that, I want to introduce today's presenters, are Irene Bushnell and David Gunn. And with that, I hand it over to them.
Thank you, Kim. Happy Thursday to everyone. Irene Bushnell, a senior manager here at Armanino. Happy to be doing these new release webinars and sharing information that came out a couple weeks ago. Hopefully lots of good new features and functions that most of you will be able to utilize in your organizations. David?
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be located. Really glad to be with you this morning. And yeah, we'll go ahead and just jump right in. So next slide. We're just going to cover our learning objectives for today. So we got 4 main learning objectives, although they're all also more, but major things are to help describe the important changes to the inner entity configuration, to review the new enhanced purchasing workflow that allows for custom emails, identify how user experience continues to be enhanced with added features to help make the navigation of the UI more simple and efficient, and finally, illustrate new capabilities for credits related to charge payoffs. And next slide. And then our agenda for today, we're going to be covering a whole host of things: user experience, general ledger, budgets and plans, construction, cash management, inter-entity inventory, platform and web services, reporting and insights, Salesforce integration, accounts payable, and purchasing. And we'll just jump right into user experience. Perfect. So the first major change here is called troubleshooting with support. So when reaching out for support, you're sometimes going to be asked to provide additional information on your problem. Usually, if you're contacting either through Armanino or you're going directly through the Intacct community, it's always a great idea to go ahead and paste this error message. And the new functionality here is that there's going to be what's called the support ID. And this is really going to help determine, us on our side as well as Sage Intacct, what specifically went wrong. And additionally, as this feature gets rolled out a little bit more, there's going to be specific pages that are going to be linked to this that have supplemental technical information, including server and user information. So a really cool little addition here, hopefully when there are errors, to help things and the process move a little bit faster. Next slide. Next one that I'm really excited about, it's a little change, but definitely going to make things a lot easier to use, is the modal can now be moved. So before, when you opened up a modal window, for example here, like in the screenshot, if you're looking at a bill in AP and you go ahead and you click on that vendor link, you would get this modal to pop out, and you couldn't completely move it, and you couldn't get to the page that was underneath. So with this new little button that's right there in that red box on the screenshot, you're going to be able to pop out this modal. You're going to be able to move it all around the screen. You can even move it to another screen if you're using a couple of different monitors. And the really cool thing here is it's going to let you work on both pages simultaneously, whereas when you popped it out in the old release, in the old UI, you could only work on that page that was popped out. So a really great way for you to be able to work on two things at the same time, and to be able to look at things simultaneously. Next slide. So this is a change probably everyone has noticed by now, but we just want to make sure that everyone does know that Action UI is now the only user interface that can be chosen. So you might have noticed that if you were switching sometimes between the old UI and the new Action UI, you could go into your user preferences right there and select switch to the previous UI. This is no longer an option. And so we do know that there were people still using the old UI, and so if you do feel like there's a task that you can't perform or can't do as well that you could in the old UI, please reach out to us or Intacct and kind of just make that known, because the new Action UI should have all of the same functionality, if not more, and definitely want that to be super user-friendly and good for everyone that's using the system. And the next slide. And then finally, in user experience, we have customized terminology by language and locale. So you're now going to be able to customize terms on the terminology list, which you get to by going to Company, Setup, and then Terminology, by your language and locale to better match the way that your users and your business practices work. So you can really tailor things to your users. Say if you are in a company where you have multiple different locations, sometimes all around the world. So for instance, you can change the term customer to client for the English Australia language and locale. You can change customer to patron for the English UK language and locale, but you can leave it as customer for the English US language and locale, which is kind of demonstrated here in the screenshot below. So some really new cool customization that you can use to really tailor the experience again to your users if you are using some kind of different terms in different locations.
Yeah, and the nice thing about this, David, of course, is the fact that then when they're working within their entities, for those, they can see exactly the name that they need to see, not necessarily what everybody's seeing on the other entities. So definitely a nice, cool feature, for sure. All right, let's go to our first polling question. Brian, can you launch the first polling question, please? Remember, for CPE, you do have to respond to the polling question. It's an easy one. Does your organization have a need to customize dimension terminology? See who's going to use that new feature. Lots of people voting. Excellent. Okay, we'll stop polling here. 3, 2, 1. Almost everybody's voted. Let's share results. Okay, so sharing results. I don't see them. Does everybody else see them?
Yeah, I do on my screen. So it looks like 28% of people say that they will. They have entities in other countries. 68% say they're US based only, and 5% say they're not sure. So yeah, I definitely think if you do have entities in other countries, this would be a really cool thing for you to use, like Irene mentioned, so that the users in those entities see what they need to see.
Yeah, excellent. All right, so since you can see the polling questions, Dave, I'll let you review all of them. Thank you.
All right, no worries.
All right, let's continue on. General Ledger. One new feature in the General Ledger, and it's a nice one if you're using approval processes, and that's the ability to be able to recall a journal entry. So you've created a journal entry, you've sent it off to be approved, then for some reason the light bulb comes on or you find documentation and you've made a mistake on that, you don't have to go to the approver and have them decline it. That's what you had to do in the past. Now you can go to the journal transaction list, you can click the recall button, and when you do that, Intacct is going to revert that back to the draft state. Then you can go ahead and make your edits and then submit it again and send it back through the approval process. So a little enhancement, but definitely a nice one for folks who do use the approval process. Budgets and plans. We'll talk about the budgeting and planning module for just a second. There's 2 new enhancements to this, and it's really related to how limiting the budgets within Sage Intacct and what you're reporting on. So when you're uploading transactions, as you can see by the screenshot, when you're importing, you now have the ability to import not only the dimension values, the dimensions that you want, but the actual dimension values. So as you can see here, if you were using the project dimension, you're checked in your import, yep, you want to import the project dimension. It then shows you the values in the project dimension, and you can actually pick and choose which values you really want to be budgeting on, which is a nice feature because a lot of times you want to do budgeting on only a few of the values in the dimension, and so this allows you to be able to do that. And then the same is true when we get over to the Sage Intacct when you're doing filtering from within Sage Intacct and you're bringing information over. We've got kind of the same thing. We have that ability, as you can see on the drop down in the picture, is you can select which dimension values that you want to include in a particular dimension. Of course, you can always pick all, but here they're showing that they're bringing in 3 projects in their actual import information. So a nice new feature here, just related to kind of filtering what you want to be included in your budgets. Actuals can be imported into P&L, balance sheet, and cash report. So this is between Sage and the budget and planning module, right? Actuals can be filtered, as we just talked about. And then down at the bottom there, it just kind of tells you where it's importing actuals. So actuals are imported as total cash balances into cash reports, right? End of month balances into the balance sheet, and monthly totals into P&L accounts, which makes logical sense because of the type of accounts those are. So more and more functionality being created all the time between the budgeting and planning module and Sage Intacct, giving you a lot more visibility into the details that you need. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about cash management. Put on your thinking hats. We got a lot of things happening here with cash management, so I'm pretty confident that almost everybody's going to benefit from something here. So bank reconciliation update. So with the new bank feed feature that was released a couple of releases ago, they continue to move forward with a lot of enhancements in that new bank reconciliation screen. Of course, as David shared, the old UI is going away, so no more previous bank reconciliation. It's completely gone, so you have to use the new bank reconciliation. Yay, we get to import QIF files again. So in the old bank screen, some of you may have been downloading a QIF, quick and interchange format type file type, and importing that into your bank rec for matching. And with the new bank rec screen, you could not use a QIF file, but now you can again. If you're unfamiliar with what that actually means, in your financial institution or your banks, almost everyone out there allows QIF file downloads. You do not have to own Quicken, okay? It's just that you can use that file format to import into your bank reconciliation for matching transactions. So if you're not using the bank feed and you're manually matching transactions and you have that QIF file format at the bank, give it a try. Use it as an import to help with matching. You can also drill down now from the entries in the bank reconciliation. So you can click on an actual transaction that's in the bank reconciliation screen, and you can go ahead and drill down and see the actual transaction. Nice features there with the bank reconciliation. This next one that I want to share with you, I'm going to actually get into Intacct for a minute because I want you to see this, but they've added a second toolbar when you're doing bank reconciliation updates. So let me get over to Sage Intacct here. Okay, you should be seeing my Technology Academy company here. I'm in my cash management under setup, and I'm looking at my checking account list, and I'm going to do a reconciliation. So when I click on reconcile, it's going to pop up my reconciliation information. And in this case, I've already started one, so I click on continue. And the reason I'm doing this in Intacct is because you guys have to see this. This toolbar across the top up here actually changes. So when I first come in and I'm looking at things and I start filtering and I want to do some things, you know, I start working, I come over here and I decide that I want to match something. So notice I have my match button over here. And of course I can still do my match on either side, but watch what happens to this toolbar the minute I click the match button. So I click on match, and voila, my toolbar changes. So I actually have a little bit different of a look. And so now Intacct is enabling you to automatically go to the next transaction, so you can do match and go next, match and go next. And so it allows you easier functionality for matching transactions. But I had to show that here in the live system because that toolbar actually changes along the way as we go through it. So a nice feature there. But two different toolbars available now in the reconciliation updates. Another enhancement, yay, we can now ignore irrelevant downloaded transactions. I know last time in our presentation we had someone who had some duplicates that they were struggling with. They couldn't get them out of their bank rec. So now we've got an option to ignore downloaded transactions. So these are, of course, with a bank feed process, okay? So when you're doing that, it's only with bank feed, of course, because that's the only one that actually really brings in the transactions into Intacct. If you're uploading a CSV file, it's just matching. It's not really bringing those transactions in, where the bank feed is bringing the transactions into Intacct. So you can ignore those transactions, and you can only ignore ones that are, you cannot ignore ones that are partially matched or cleared. They can't be ignored, of course. So it has to be a complete transaction that has no action on it, and then you can go ahead and do that transaction ignoring, which is a really nice feature. Keep going, we got more. Another one in the bank reconciliation is you can, of course, bring back ignored transactions so that they are available again. So if for some reason you accidentally ignore a transaction and you need the ability to bring that back, you can. You can ignore transactions in two different areas. So you can ignore them here in the bank reconciliation screen itself under Actions. And when you click on Actions, there will be an Ignore button. I don't have the ability to show that right now because I don't have a live connection to a bank feed. So when I click on the action, I don't see the Ignore button. That's why I don't have it in the screenshot. But if you do have bank feeds connected, if you go into your Intacct and take a look, you'll see under that Action button, you do have that Ignore option there. Or you can go, of course, to cash management, to the all section where the bank transactions are, and you can ignore from within that list as well. Okay, so several nice new enhancements for bank reconciliation, and David and I anticipate we're going to continue to see a lot more of those on every release as they continue with the whole bank feed process and their new bank reconciliation screen. Some exciting enhancements in this release related to cash management and charge payoffs. So now currently in Intacct, you can select a negative credit card transaction and create a payoff. Okay, so you can see in the screen there, I've got that $25 transaction. I could send over the $25 transaction, or I can send over a negative with the individual transactions. And the good news is Intacct is keeping that as a separate line on the bill that it creates. So I selected 3 items. I'm taking it over to the bill in Sage Intacct. And as you can see, the $25 was not netted against one of those 250s. It actually is its own line item, which when we go in now to pay bills and go into the pay bills screen, I have that $25 credit that I can use on any bill. I don't have to use it on this bill that was actually created. So a really nice enhancement here, that ability to be able to have that separate line item for the credit. And then as I mentioned a second ago, you'll see here on my bills list, so this is the AP bills list, I actually have a negative credit card payoff. So if you need to get a credit over to apply against a previous charge payoff, that's going to be available here. Really nice enhancement for those of us that have negative transactions once in a while. Most people do, right? With credit cards, you have a refund or a credit comes in as a negative. So now we have a lot more flexibility around that. Another enhancement is the ability to see the bill from the charge payoff screen. So you go in and you're looking at all of your charge payoffs and you want to go directly to the bill. You don't have to go over to AP, go to your bills list, start filtering and search for it. They've added this nice hyperlink on the charge payoff list. So I can actually go into that charge payoff, click on the bill that was created by that charge payoff and review it directly from the hyperlink. So good enhancements related to the charge payoff. Some definite notes that you're going to want to be aware of with this new negative line item. There are a few things that it won't do. So if you have a partial payoff of a negative multi-line transaction, so in other words, you don't want the whole $25, you want just like $12.50, okay? Your charge payoff needs to include the entire amount of the transaction. So you can't do a partial payoff on a negative amount. Partial payoff of an inline credit, same thing. Validation is now in place that prevents payoff of only the negative line item in a multi-line transaction that also includes positives amount. So what is that saying? That's talking about an actual charge card transaction. So you have a charge card transaction that has multiple lines on it, right? So let's get back over to Intacct for just a minute. So now what we're talking about right here is actual charge card transactions, and I do have to get into the entity to show that. So under cash management, we have our charge card transactions. What this is talking about is if you have a card transaction, so one transaction, and this one probably just has one line item, but it would be a negative one. So here we have our detail lines. If in fact I had a negative line item on this transaction, right, this is considered to be a multi-line transaction. So in this case, if I were to use this transaction in a charge payoff, I have to bring the $15 along with the $157.85. Intacct won't let me bring this credit over separately. You do have to bring the line items together for a transaction that has multi-lines. Okay, couple more in here. Partial payoff of positive and negative. You can create a partial payoff for multiple transactions if at least one of which includes a negative amount, but the partial payment can be made on the positive amount only. So that's the case again where you have that all within one transaction. Okay, you can account for single credit card transactions that net to zero. We talked about that. So it can net to zero and that's okay. And you can select multiple credit card transactions that net to zero and combine them in one payoff. So some nice cleanup things that they did here with the charge payoffs. If you're using that, or if you weren't using it because you were kind of struggling, you have a lot of $0 transactions or net zero, might be a good time to start thinking about using it again because it definitely is some good information. Good enhancements. Okay, let's go ahead and do polling question number 2, Brian. We're curious as to how many organizations are using bank feeds. Okay, lots of people voting. We'll give you just another second or two here. We'll then start the countdown. All right. 3, 2, 1, ending polling, sharing results. David, I'll let you review.
Yeah, so it looks like 10% say yes, they are fully utilizing, 25% say yes with a few of our bank accounts, and 65% say no, not at all.
All right, so good information. Bank feeds is really a good function if you haven't used it before. If you need more information, of course, you can reach out through our support team. You can read about it. I think that when it was initially rolled out, Some people were a little bit hesitant to use it because it was a new feature, but Intacct has done a really good job cleaning things up with the bank reconciliation, as you saw today. Lots of new enhancements, so would encourage you to consider it if it makes sense. All right, David.
All right, great. And before I jump into construction real quick, just for Kim and Brian on our side, it looks like a few people are having an issue with clicking the choices on the polling. So I don't know if there's something that we can look into, but I just kind of wanted to point that out. But yeah, let's jump right into construction. So next slide. So this is the new construction functionality that's going to be rolled out slowly, and it's going to include a lot more functionality and use down the line, but it's some good information to have right now and to look forward to if you are in this kind of industry. So construction functionality is available right now for new customers that are what's called the early adopter program. And some of these features that are going to be included in this whole construction functionality are you're going to be able to track construction projects through the full project lifecycle. That's going to include, estimating, your data collection, your accounting. It's going to ensure your project work is priced, communicated, approved, and incorporated accurately into your billing cycle. With this new construction functionality, you're also going to be able to incrementally invoice your customers based on contractual terms. And it's going to be able to give them all of the necessary details like amounts, total paid, percentage of the work that's been completed, amount due, total outstanding, all those things, outstanding for that project. You're going to be able to track and manage the payment or receipt of any contractual retainage amounts. And then finally, it's going to allow for even more reporting on project progress, cost, profitability. So again, if you are within construction, really, really cool thing here for a lot of cool project accounting type stuff and functionality within that. Next slide. All right, and then let's talk about inter-entity. So a lot of really, really cool stuff here in inter-entity. Probably one of the, like cash management, probably one of the bigger sections here in this release. So let's just jump right into it. The first thing being the new IET account setup page. So if anyone has been in this or has seen this yet, you're definitely going to notice a big difference between this page and what it looked like in the previous version of the release. So the setup is now going to be on a completely centralized page instead of having to go into each page for each entity. And so you may remember that in the past, if you wanted to look at your mappings or your overrides or change anything, you had to go into the entities page, and then you had to go into each entity to look at the account and the mappings and then go back out. And it wasn't really great for the flow of looking everything in the context of how it is in the whole. So you're definitely now going to see that on this page. Everything is really easy to view, all on one page. Definitely going to allow for a lot of ease of looking and examining there. And how this was migrated to R2. So they have what's called the basic and the advanced setup. So you were going to be migrated to the basic setup if your previous setup only used default accounts, and you're going to be migrated, or you were migrated to the advanced setup if you had one or more override accounts. So basically, the basic setup defines a common receivable and a payable account that's going to be used for all transactions involving that entity. So, really because it's unnecessary to separately settle balances among entities that are involved based on this setup, only one inter-entity receivable and one inter-entity payable account is going to be defined per entity. Kind of on the flip side of that, with the advanced setup, relationships are going to be mapped between pairs of entities specifically. So this is really going to allow for a lot greater detail in being able to track like who owes who, being able to settle balances between each entity pairing individually if that is needed. And you're also going to be able to use any combination of receivable and payable accounts, and based on the accounts you defined in your previous IET setup. So just a few things to note there. And then a few other things to note just in general with the new IET setup is that everything on this page must be a mapped pair. It's not going to support accounts that are only defined to one side. Another really cool new feature here is that you can now use CSV import to add, change, remove mappings. Again, trying to increase the automation or the time in which it takes to change these things. So a really cool addition there. Removing mappings is going to block any future transactions between entities. And one thing we really want to call out here is that we don't recommend switching between the basic and advanced setup, as doing so will completely wipe out whatever mappings, whatever overrides are already set up on your account. So we do say, we recommend against it. If you do feel the need to make those changes, it's definitely recommended to do so at the beginning of a period, and you're also going to be able to export the template. So we definitely recommend also to do that before making any changes, just in case something does go wrong. You can go ahead and re-import and you'll be back to where you were. So some really cool new changes here on the account setup page. Next slide. Next, we'll be talking about the auto inter-entity transactions. So IETs, auto IETs. So auto IETs will no longer preserve dimensions. It's only going to preserve the location and the entity. And so that's just one thing to note here. Another thing to note, auto IET for multi-base currency journal entries is now going to be supported. Wasn't in the past, something new here now in this release. And so a couple things to note about this specifically is that it's only going to work if the transaction currency is the same as the base currency of the source entity. And so kind of like this screenshot shows, your transaction debits and credits definitely do need to balance, but your base debit and credits do not. So just want to call that out about the auto IET for multiple base currency JEs. And then finally with the auto IETs is that auto IETs will now show on the source transaction. So for example, on an AP payment, rather than having to go and do or look at a separate JE to see what that transaction was. So yeah, cool new functionality for auto IET transactions. And then next slide. And then finally, in inter-entity, we have subset consolidation. So the new IET setup will support subset consolidations and is no longer going to add all of your inter-entity accounts to that consolidation book. So kind of previously how this worked is that all inter-entity accounts would be selected. Now you're only going to have accounts associated with your entity pairings that are selected for your eliminations, with the option to include others as needed or as seen as fit. So cool new functionality there. And just one thing to note about this specifically is it does require the advanced setup to be able to distinguish between those entity pairings and your mapping. So if you are using basic, you will not be able to go ahead and make use of this feature.
Good information, and we would encourage everybody to get into your instance in Intacct and go look at that if you hadn't noticed it yet, and go to your menu item below entity where you see those the mapping screen and stuff now. So go take a look at that and make sure everything came over okay in the release. It should, but it's always good to do a double check. Right, David?
Totally. Yeah, totally.
Excellent. All right.
All right, next rolling in. Yeah, rolling in right into inventory.
Okay.
So a few quick changes here in inventory. The first of those being is that you now have the ability to import linked inventory adjustment transactions. So within Sage Intacct, you can link value-only inventory adjustment transactions to that source purchase transaction or your inventory control module transaction to go ahead and increase or decrease the value of any certain items. And so current functionality actually of the system before the release as well actually already required that adjustments for any FIFO or LIFO items must be linked. And so linking to the source transaction is going to ensure that changes in your value are definitely going to be tied back to the right cost layers. And so this is really an important step. And so if you have more than one value only adjustment to make, you're now going to be able to import those to try to go ahead and save you some time. So if you are going to use this import file, it's going to be the standard inventory control transaction template. and you're going to see the new field that's labeled the ADJ doc ID, and you're going to be able to there put in the transaction to help you identify the source transaction to link that adjustment to it. So hopefully this will save some time if you do have a good number of those value only adjustment transactions to make. Next slide. And then just another quick note here about inventory is the new inventory control objects and web services if you are making use of these. So in this new release, Intacct went ahead and added a bunch of new objects and functions for use in web services. Kind of highlighted that here on this screenshot. These are the new ones. And these are specifically going to allow you to be able to create bins with info for your warehouse functionality, such as packing and picking. So if you are looking for some more functionality here in web services, hopefully these new objects and functions are going to allow you to do so. And yeah, throwing it over to Irene for platform and web services.
All right, perfect. Thank you. So just a couple little things for platform and customization services. So Sage Intacct is now working with what's called the Code Mirror library to bring improved script editing experience to users. If you have an IT person that helps you do stuff in Sage Intacct, you might want to share this information with them if they haven't seen it. But basically it has to do with the edit page layout, not the layout that I'll go show you. Sorry, I'm tripping up on my words and I want to say it correctly, so give me just a second. Edit the page, not edit the layout. So two things related to that. There is one place in Intacct. I know David said old UI, it's out, it's gone. There is still one thing in Intacct that you can do in the old UI, and that is platform services and customization services. So under your name in the top right hand corner, if you go to my preferences and you scroll towards the bottom, there's this little section here called personalized platform and customization services. You can click on the layout type and you can either use the previous UI or you can use the action UI. The nice thing is with the action UI, you now have the ability to do light mode or dark mode on script components. And that's not going to mean much to most of you, but if you have somebody who's doing script components in Intacct, then that will be helpful for them. Some people do much better in a dark screen versus a light screen. And then there's some debugging components that are turned on. So where this is relevant is in let me go back here, under the edit this page under more actions. So let me just get back into Intacct so I can show you what I'm talking about. So anytime you're in a screen, okay, doesn't matter what screen we're in, based on permissions, so you have to be a full business user in order to see this, an admin user. Under the more actions, there's a couple of different options, right? So we have edit this page, we have edit entries layout. So we're talking about the edit this page. That's the one that we're talking about here. When we click on edit this page, and I know some of you have done this before, you accidentally click that and get in here and you're like, whoa, I'm behind the scenes. Wait a minute, I'm gonna get out of here, and you just cancel. So now I'm behind the page where I can do things, and this is where a lot of programmers go. This is what this new setting in platform is talking about. So when I get in here and I start looking at any script components and click on edit, I have the ability to change it to dark mode or light mode. It's doing some new scripting, all of that kind of programming stuff. So just a quick visual there. We're talking about the edit this page, not the edit layout that's under the more actions in that screen. And those are the enhancements related to platform services. So a couple little ones. Again, if you have an IT person that helps out with some of this, you might want to share this particular 2 slides with them. All right, we're going to do our next polling question. Thanks to all of you who have been posting in the Q&A. For those of you that have not been able to respond, you have to make sure you are not in full screen mode. So get out of full screen mode and then you should be able to click and answer polling questions. And if you want CPE, make sure that you are answering polling questions. So polling question number 3, our company uses script and HTML components within pages. Yes, we use some. No, we aren't using any. I am unsure. I do not know. All right, let's give everybody a minute here to answer that question. Okay, we'll start the countdown here in just a second. It's either a yes, no, or you're not sure. All right, ending polling. 3, 2, 1, ending and sharing results. David.
So it looks like 8% of people say yes, we use some, 39% say no, we aren't using any, and 52% say I am unsure either way.
Ah, okay. So good call out there. So we are going to be doing some training academy classes around editing scripts and things that you can do on pages. So you might be able to find out more on that if that's of any interest to you in the future. But yeah, good question. So maybe check with some other folks to see if you're using those within your organization. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. David, back to you.
Yeah, we'll take it away with reporting and insights. All right, so I know we did this on the last release that Irene and I did, but again, we kind of just want to call this out. Ideas that came from users who posted in the community. We do really want to call this out and keep empowering people to definitely, try to make your voice heard, post in the community, be active on ideas that you think could benefit you because we have seen more and more in the releases that, when Intacct does get these things on the roadmap, they do care about, seeing the things that users are wanting. And so it's really cool, giving power to the people, definitely to make a change and hopefully help you as it, regards to your use of the system. So just wanted to call that out again. And the couple of changes that were actually made in reporting and insights are both changes that made from users posting in community. So really, really cool to see that. So this first one is the Find Reports Faster. So this is a new search option in the Reports Center. So if you go to Reports, Reports Center, this is obviously that centralized location that has, every report and graph in the system. But there's now this search bar that's going to exist kind of right at the top near the tabs. That's going to help you to, use keywords and search. Say if your company does have a lot of reports and you're going in and you're obviously looking for something that you haven't used before, but you think it might exist. This is a really cool way for you to, be able to search those things and see if that does exist there, and hopefully help you do it a lot faster. Obviously, you could use the Control F, but this is also going to now let you use keywords that also might be in descriptions. So it's really going to search through a little bit of everything. So cool new addition here in the Find Reports Faster. And then specifically within the financial reports list, kind of what is shown here on this screenshot, is you're going to notice that there's two new filters here, the report type and report audience. Again, things that can be populated as you create reports or as you edit reports, again, to try to help you, search and find things a little bit faster within these lists. And next slide. And again, like we mentioned, another idea that came from community, this is the Streamlined Excel report. So across all reports, when choosing the Excel option to export the file, is now going to use the newer XLSX format instead of the old .xls format. This is a pretty small change that might have been noticed by some, might have not been noticed by others. But this change was basically made because the new XSLX format is the default format that is used by Microsoft and Excel to save files. So just to kind of keep in tune with what is going on there, Sage Intacct also wanted to make that change in how things get exported. And so you'll still be able to open all your older exported reports regardless of the file type. This is just kind of on a going forward basis how things will be exported. And yeah, next slide. And I'll hand it over to Irene for the Salesforce integration.
Excellent, thank you. So just real quick, one enhancement related to the order entry sync feature. So if you are using Salesforce to Intacct integration, make sure that whoever is doing that integration is aware of this new feature. But now the order entry sync allows you to automatically automate the creation of the sales transactions in Intacct once the workflow is done in Salesforce. So a nice option there to be able to automate that. There's a new Sync to Sage Intacct button that goes along with that, of course, so that you can, when it's clicked, it sends and receives the information between Intacct and Sage, and then you can use the Salesforce Process Builder to respond to criteria on an opportunity that when met automatically creates the sales document. So a lot of new functionality, not a lot, but a few new nice enhancements related to the order entry sync feature between Salesforce and Intacct. All right, back to you, David. Accounts payable.
All right, AP. All right, so first thing we're going to touch on in AP is the enhancements to the pay bills filter. The pay bills screen, the filters that exist within that screen. So there's three new enhancements, major enhancements here to this screen. The first of those being the visibility into your filter results. So this is going to be a new insight you might notice for how many bills are going to fit your applied criteria and how many are going to appear on the page. The next enhancement is the improved functionality for bill item filtering. And so now when you apply a filter for specific bill line items, the system is only gonna will return the entire bill now, whereas in the past it only just returned that specific line item. And this is a really cool new change because now it's going to let you view everything in context, the line in context as it regards to the entire bill and not just the line. So a cool new change there. And then finally is the display all bills enhancement. And so this will be a really, really good feature for you and your company if you have a very small amount of bills to pay. And so you're going to be able to configure accounts payable if you go to AP Setup Configuration to load all your ready to pay bills on the pay bill screen without ever having to apply a filter. And so this option is going to be called the automatically display all ready to pay bills on the pay bills page, and AP configuration right there in that screenshot that's in that red box. And so really cool option here if you do have a smaller amount of bills to pay, hopefully to try to just save you some time so that if it is marked, you just go right in, no filters need to be applied, check off what you need to do, and go ahead and pay those bills. So yeah, some cool new enhancements here to the pay bills filters. And then finally in AP are changes to how inline credits are going to be applied. So to go ahead and keep your AP aging and your AP subledger reports balanced, Sage Intacct went ahead and improved how cross-location inline credits function for your zero value bills. And so now when you create a net zero bill, any inline credits that were created across locations are going to be auto-applied regardless of how your AP or your multi-entity configuration is set up. So just a quick example of this would be, say if you create a bill that has a line item for your San Francisco location, and you also create an inline credit for that bill for your Boston location. So when you go ahead and you post the bill, the credit for the Boston location is going to automatically apply to the San Francisco location. And so basically, in other words, that credit will not be available to apply later on any other bills. So just some kind of changes here in how inline credits are applied, things to take note of, and kind of how the logic is going to be working here going forward in this release.
Excellent.
Yeah, next slide. And I think Irene is going to be wrapping it up with purchasing.
Purchasing, yes. Yay, this is so exciting. Finally, it's here, guys. We can now do custom email templates for purchasing. I know that this has been a long time coming. People that use the purchasing module and they send out purchase orders and stuff, and they always just have that standard email. So now you can create custom email templates for your purchasing type transactions, just like you were able to do in order entry. The good news is it is the same screen If you are using the order entry custom email templates, it's the same exact screen. You just choose that it's going to be for purchase orders. You can create different email templates based on who is sending the different documents or different types of transactions, okay? And Intacct uses the codes, field codes, to help you be able to do that. I'm going to hop over to Intacct again for just a second. We're going to go back up to the top level, and I just want to show you this in case you're not familiar with it. So under Company menu, under Setup, we have email templates right here down in the bottom. You might not have permissions. If you don't have permissions, you might not see this, but you can create lots of different email templates. And so when you go in to add a new email template, you now have the ability to add based on purchase order or contracts or order entry. So again, same exact screen that was here before, but with you can choose your purchase orders now. You have a reply to field, a reply to name, okay, and then Intacct starts giving you all of the fields that you can use in an email. And what it's doing here is it's giving you the field code to put within your particular area. So if I want the contact email, it populates this little contact email for me. I can copy and paste that down and put it in the to. So what you're doing basically is a little bit of coding, right? Because you're going to send purchase orders, you want it to go to the email for a particular contact, but it's going to be different based on the vendor. So that's the way this whole process works, which is really nice. And then as you get down into the message content of an email, same thing. Down below, you can pick different fields of what you want to put in. So you can do a very custom email. Hello, include information. Again, I think one of the bigger call-outs about this is you can have different ones for different users or different vendors and all of that sort of information. So lots of flexibility there. You can default an email template on your purchasing transaction definition. So under Configure Purchasing, your Documents Configuration tab, you can assign an email template to the particular transaction, okay? No, unfortunately, you cannot do it by entity. So you do have only one email template per transaction type. But of course, if you wanted a different template for a different entity, you could just duplicate that existing template and copy it and have a second one for an entity and assign that one a particular email. So you can do it by entity if you need to with multiple transaction definitions. You can add a default template to a vendor. So when you go into the vendor record, you go to the additional information tab all the way down at the bottom. You now have the ability to do a purchase order template that you've set up. So that's kind of nice. Okay. And you can override a default template if you need to, okay, when you're doing your printing or emailing of documents. So when you go to purchasing and you click print or email documents, you can override during that process if you need to. Works for all transaction types, doesn't matter if it's a purchase order or a vendor invoice. You can do an email template that you're going to need there. You can have as many as you want, again, and you can assign them to the vendor level, etc. The hierarchy for Intacct when doing email templates, when you go to send a transaction, an email template, the first place Intacct looks is on the vendor record. So if there is a custom email template on the vendor record, it's going to use that one. If it doesn't find one there, it's going to go look on the purchase transaction. And if it doesn't find one on the purchase transaction, then it's going to still use the generic standard one that's out of the box. So good information there. Definitely something for people who are using purchasing. I know that have wanted to do that. No, we can't use it in AP yet for sending bills, but I would imagine that's not far down the pipeline either as they continue to enhance the ability to customize those sorts of things. All right, the last polling question of the day, polling question number 4. Brian. Looking at some of the new features today, we could only put 6 in here, so that was our limit. That's why we only see 6. But which features of the ones that we have listed here do you think your company will benefit from? Lots of people voting. The recall feature and journal entry approvals, the inter-entity configuration changes, negative charge payoff enhancements, paying bills filter enhancements. Those were some nice ones. I am excited about those. And using some custom purchasing emails. Okay, we're gonna end polling. 3, 2, 1, ending polling. Sharing results. David.
All right, so it looks like 56% of people said the recall feature would be helpful.
Nice.
40% with the inter-entity config changes, 23% for the negative charge payoff enhancements, 71% for the pay bills filter enhancements,
Okay.
and finally 20% for the custom purchasing emails.
Excellent. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Most people enter bills and pay them in Intacct, so a lot of people will benefit from that one.
Yeah.
Excellent. And the charge payoffs, good. Excellent. Well, glad to hear that a lot of people will be benefiting from those. So in conclusion, I can't believe we have about 5 minutes left, so we'll take some Q&A here in just a minute. A couple things. We covered several things in here, some nice new enhancements along the way. One other thing we did want to share with you is that we are really excited about rolling out the Technology Academy. These are online hands-on classes and online webinars that there is a fee associated with these. These are learning environments. You should be getting emails for those. If you don't, you can go to our website page and you can see tomorrow there will be a whole new set of classes and webinars available out there for June and July. We're going to continue to grow that. So just know that that's out there. If you enjoy doing these kind of releases, we're doing a lot more learning ones that are specific topics and that sort of information. So let's open up for questions. David, what other questions do we have in the queue that maybe we haven't answered yet? Or if anybody has a question, go ahead and I think Kim, Brian, can they unmute themselves to ask a question if they have one?
Actually, Irene, let's have them put it in the question box.
Okay, I wasn't sure if they could actually unmute and ask one, so.
Okay, thank you.
I do have, so there's one in here, this is a good one about Excel. So when you download to Excel, Intacct defaults the font to a Verdona size 3. It's too small. That is based on an Excel setting, I believe. David, I'm pretty sure that if you go into Excel preferences, there's a setting in there that lets you control what font is chosen when you import data or when you bring data in. So if your font is doing that really small 3 size, I am sure it is a setting in Excel. I don't know if the person who posted that it's not based on Excel, she's saying.
Interesting.
Yeah. So go ahead and send a ticket in with David, but I was able to solve that with another person and it was a setting that they had. So, all right.
It looks like there's a question about the kind of like dark mode that you referred to in terms of like the platform services and those kind of changes. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that there is a full dark mode for all of Intacct, right? It's
correct.
only for those.
That's correct. So
Okay.
that dark mode is only related to the platform services when you're behind the scenes in Intacct and doing things in that edit page. It's not relevant to the screens themselves that you see when you're doing data entry. That's correct.
Gotcha.
All right, there's another question. Is there any updates to the search functionality so that we can search for a word within the field instead of having to know the first word of the field? Good question. So I'm sure there is, because let's get into Intacct. When you click on the search up here, we've got 1 more minute, but let's just go in here. So I'm going to go into advanced search. And when I'm searching for something here, right, see where it says exact word or phrase, you can go in and says, right, like has any of these words. So you've got some options here if that's kind of what you're referring to when you're in this search function here. And then of course, whenever you're searching on a list view, you can use your wildcard, right? So if
Mhm.
I'm looking for everything that has paper in it, I can use my wildcard and do PAP for paper, and it's going to return any transactions that have paper. So, okay. So you can use
Yeah.
the wildcard in search, or is that what we're talking about maybe? Or in the search itself over here, you can use this.
Yeah, I know definitely in the list view you can definitely use the wildcard. I haven't been able to test here in this search to see if you could maybe do the same.
I don't think so, because
Yeah.
I think you have to use these.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you have to use these. I don't think this recognizes the wildcard.
Yeah.
And we are at time. We respect everybody's time. So we'll finish answering any questions via email. If we missed one, thank you all very, very much. We sincerely appreciate your time today, and happy to have you along. Hopefully you learned some fun things. You'll get some efficiencies, some more good things out of it in Intacct. David, any final thoughts from you?
No, it was just thank you everybody for joining. We really appreciate it. And yeah, have a great rest of your day, great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
everybody.